after another violent weekend in Chicago. 7 people killed, 12 others wounded in separate shootings across the city.
January 31st, 2026. Just hours ago, the United States witnessed a legal earthquake unlike anything seen in modern history. At exactly 2:47 a.m. Eastern Time, the Supreme Court issued a 6-3 emergency ruling that has instantly shaken the foundations of American law and governance. This isn't a slow-moving policy change. This is a sudden, irreversible shift with consequences that will ripple through federal agencies, state governments, and the daily lives of millions of Americans. Most people only see headlines that hint at the magnitude of this ruling, but the reality is far more severe. The court didn't simply issue a procedural order or a technical clarification. They struck at the heart of a long-standing legal precedent, altering how laws will be interpreted, enforced, and challenged moving forward. Legal scholars are calling it a once-in-a-generation decision, one that will be studied in textbooks for decades to come. The political ramifications are just as staggering. Leaders on both sides of the aisle are scrambling to understand the implications, while agencies tasked with enforcing federal law are now working through unprecedented uncertainty. The decision has immediate impact on millions of Americans, affecting everything from federal programs to state-level enforcement policies. Citizens across the nation are waking up to a reality they did not expect, and the ripple effects are being felt globally. We're talking about a moment where the entire machinery of accountability, governance, and legal interpretation is being tested in real time. If you've ever wondered what it looks like when the Supreme Court steps in with full authority to reshape the law overnight, this is it. The stakes could not be higher, and every American should be paying close attention. Before we go deeper into exactly what this 6-3 ruling entails, I want you to comment your thoughts below, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell. We are about to break down the most significant Supreme Court decision of 2026, and every development matters as this story unfolds minute by minute. The immediate reaction to the Supreme Court's 6-3 emergency ruling has been nothing short of chaotic. Federal agencies woke up this morning scrambling to reinterpret long-standing protocols, while state governments are now facing the daunting task of aligning local enforcement with the new legal reality. The speed and scope of this ruling mean that there is no playbook, no precedent that fully prepares anyone for what comes next. Every official, from Washington bureaucrats to governors in swing states, is being forced to reassess their next moves in real time. What makes this ruling so extraordinary is that it does not merely affect policy. It fundamentally reshapes power structures. The Supreme Court didn't leave room for ambiguity. By acting with emergency authority, the justices effectively bypassed months, if not years, of lower court deliberations, and they sent an unmistakable signal. Certain legal questions are no longer open for delay. Agencies that might have otherwise tried to stall, interpret loosely, or even ignore previous court guidance now face the full weight of the highest court in the land. Political leaders are feeling the tremors too. Capitol Hill is in a state of organized panic as lawmakers on both sides realize that their current strategies may be rendered obsolete overnight. Conversations that started quietly in offices and secure rooms are now going public, with party leaders scrambling to issue statements, adjust messaging, and reassure constituents. The Supreme Court has not just made a ruling, it has upended months of political calculation and forced the nation into immediate, high-stakes decision-making. Legal experts are calling this a constitutional reset. They warn that every previous assumption about enforcement, jurisdiction, and federal oversight must now be questioned. For the average American, the implications are profound. Programs, regulations, and directives that once seemed permanent or predictable are now in flux, creating uncertainty that could affect everything from taxes and social programs to civil liberties and business operations. To fully understand the magnitude of what just happened, you need to grasp the unprecedented nature of a Supreme Court stepping in with emergency authority at this scale. The justices have essentially said the status quo is untenable and immediate action is required. This is not theory. This is happening now. Every decision made in the next 72 hours will be influenced by this ruling, and the long-term consequences are already being debated in legal circles worldwide. As we break down the details of this 6-3 emergency ruling, stay engaged. Comment below what you think this means for federal and state agencies, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. The next few days will show us how deeply this Supreme Court decision will reshape the United States, and you need to be informed every step of the way. The fallout from the Supreme Court's ruling is already rippling across the financial, political, and social sectors. Stock markets opened today with jittery volatility, futures swinging wildly as traders scrambled to assess which industries and contracts would be affected by the instant legal shift. Wall Street veterans are describing this as a moment that changes the rules of the game overnight, where previously safe assumptions about regulation, contracts, and compliance are now in question. International reactions are equally dramatic. Allies in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East are scrambling to understand the implications, convening emergency calls with U.S. officials, and publicly questioning whether long-term agreements can still be trusted. This is not just domestic chaos. This is a global ripple effect. Governments and multinational corporations alike are trying to adjust strategy, legal compliance, and supply chains in response to a ruling that no one fully anticipated. Meanwhile, back in Washington, politicians are trying to process the ruling without appearing reactive. But the pressure is undeniable. Leadership meetings are running around the clock, with aides documenting every potential consequence and drafting contingency plans. Republicans and Democrats alike are realizing that political narratives they carefully constructed are now vulnerable. Messaging strategies designed for the midterms, for upcoming legislative fights, or for public confidence are immediately obsolete, leaving parties scrambling for coherence. Legal analysts are emphasizing the unprecedented constitutional magnitude. A 6-3 emergency ruling from the Supreme Court is rare in any circumstance. And to see it applied at a moment like this, with millions of Americans' daily lives potentially affected, is historic. Judges are now expected to align lower court rulings, federal directives, and enforcement protocols with this decision immediately, leaving virtually no room for delay or debate. At the center of this storm is the question of accountability. For years, agencies and politicians have assumed they could navigate a slow-moving legal system, leveraging time to implement policy, manage public perception, or avoid political consequences. That window has now vanished. The Supreme Court has signaled that delay is no longer acceptable, and the enforcement machinery of the federal government must act instantly and decisively. For everyday Americans, this may seem abstract, but the consequences are tangible. Certain federal programs could see immediate freezes or adjustments pending interpretation of the ruling. States that rely on federal guidance may find themselves conflicted and under pressure to comply or face legal challenges. Businesses, large and small, must reevaluate contracts, compliance obligations, and risk exposure as legal clarity is temporarily suspended. The speed and certainty of this ruling have created a new reality. Nothing in modern history matches this combination of Supreme Court authority, political implications, and immediate real-world consequences. If you want to fully understand the gravity of this moment, stay with us, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment your thoughts below, because the next 48 hours will be decisive in shaping how America responds to this unprecedented Supreme Court intervention. The Supreme Court's 6-3 ruling didn't just shift policy. It obliterated the last line of legal defense for key figures who thought they were untouchable. Sources on Capitol Hill and inside federal agencies are describing the reaction as panic mixed with disbelief. Lawmakers are openly asking whether this ruling sets a precedent that could redefine accountability at every level of government. And the answer appears to be yes. For the first time in decades, the highest court has bypassed traditional bureaucratic delays, signaling that enforcement cannot wait for political convenience or public opinion. Immediately after the decision, emergency meetings were called across multiple federal agencies, including the Treasury, Department of Justice, and Homeland Security. Analysts are describing these meetings as all-hands-on-deck operations, designed to assess the full scope of the Supreme Court's directives and to implement them before chaos spreads further. Every agency head is being forced to confront questions they never anticipated facing this quickly. How do you comply with a ruling of this magnitude in real time? What are the legal liabilities if action is delayed? And how do you ensure public confidence while avoiding further panic? Political operatives are scrambling. Campaign strategies that were months in the making are now irrelevant overnight. And party leaders are being forced to recalculate their messaging in real time. Republican and Democratic lawmakers alike are realizing that this is no longer about partisan advantage. It's about survival in a system that just shifted its rules under their feet. Emails, calls, and confidential briefings are reportedly flying around the Capitol at lightning speed as lawmakers try to determine how to respond without alienating constituents or violating federal directives. Meanwhile, outside the Beltway, corporations and international partners are reacting with visible shock. Multinational companies are issuing statements of compliance, adjusting stock positions, and reevaluating contracts. Investors are closely watching the Federal Reserve, regulatory bodies, and federal compliance offices to see whether this ruling triggers immediate adjustments in market expectations. Even a small delay in interpreting or implementing the decision could lead to massive financial consequences, potentially affecting trillions in assets globally. Legal experts are unanimous. This is not a routine ruling. The Supreme Court didn't merely interpret law. It issued a directive that requires immediate, coordinated action across branches of government. That level of judicial intervention is extraordinarily rare and signals that the court is willing to step directly into operational governance when it deems the stakes high enough. In effect, the ruling has transformed judicial authority into executive-level enforcement, creating a dynamic where compliance is mandatory, rapid, and non-negotiable. For ordinary citizens, the implications may feel distant, but they are not. Any disruption in federal operations, programs, or regulatory enforcement will filter down into daily life, from delays in federal contracts and permits to shifts in tax guidance and public services. This is the real-world impact of a ruling that moves faster than traditional political or bureaucratic channels and reshapes expectations for how power is exercised in Washington. The speed, scope, and clarity of this decision have caught everyone off guard. But it also sends a clear message. The era of delay and impunity is officially over. The Supreme Court has acted decisively. The federal government must respond immediately. And the political and financial landscapes have been upended in ways that will resonate for months, if not years. If you want to stay ahead of the next moves from the Supreme Court, lawmakers, and the agencies now under pressure, comment your thoughts below, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because we will break down every development as it happens, minute by minute, decision by decision. The fallout from the Supreme Court's 6-3 ruling is already spreading like wildfire, and insiders are warning that this is only the beginning. Key federal agencies are now coordinating across jurisdictions to ensure the ruling is implemented, while political operatives are scrambling to rewrite their messaging in real time. Sources familiar with the situation describe emergency briefings in every corner of Capitol Hill, with lawmakers being handed legal summaries that they have never seen before, outlining the immediate obligations, consequences, and potential liabilities triggered by the decision. Every strategist in Washington is asking the same urgent question. How do we respond without collapsing under the weight of the court's directives? Emails and calls are flying between congressional offices, the White House, and federal agencies, as the realization sets in that inaction is no longer an option. Republican and Democratic leadership alike are frantically calculating the political fallout, from re-election campaigns to committee hearings and public statements. One veteran Capitol Hill aide described the atmosphere as panic with a sense of inevitability, noting that for the first time in decades, no party can shield itself from immediate accountability. At the same time, this ruling has lit a fuse internationally. Allies in Europe and Asia are reportedly convening emergency calls with Washington officials, demanding clarity on the implications of the court's decision. Financial markets are already responding. Futures trading is volatile. Global stocks are reacting. And hedge funds are scrambling to adjust positions based on how the ruling will affect federal oversight, international agreements, and regulatory enforcement. Analysts warn that even minor delays in compliance could trigger cascading effects across multiple industries. Inside Washington, legal analysts are emphasizing that this is far more than a policy shift. It is a structural recalibration of power. The court's ruling explicitly removes ambiguity, leaving no room for bureaucratic delay or partisan maneuvering. Agencies must now act immediately, and any failure to comply could trigger legal consequences that directly affect agency heads, executives, and lawmakers. The language in the ruling is unambiguous. This is urgent, non-negotiable, and enforceable. Meanwhile, corporate America is feeling the pressure. CEOs, board members, and legal teams are reviewing compliance protocols and advising teams on immediate adjustments to contracts, reporting obligations, and financial planning. Multinationals with exposure to federal contracts, international trade, and regulatory oversight are scrambling to mitigate risk, knowing that a failure to act swiftly could have trillions in financial implications. And here's the reality for everyday Americans. While much of this may feel like political theater, the effects will trickle down. Regulatory changes, enforcement priorities, and federal operations will all adjust to align with the court's directives, impacting everything from social programs and tax policies to national security operations. This ruling demonstrates how judicial decisions at the highest level can immediately reshape governance and daily life. To put it bluntly, the Supreme Court has changed the rules of the game overnight. Lawmakers, agencies, corporations, and international partners are all now operating under a new reality where inaction is impossible. Every minute counts, and every decision made in the next 72 hours will determine how far-reaching the consequences become. If you want to stay informed as events unfold, make sure to comment your thoughts below, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We will be breaking down each agency reaction, each legislative move, and each corporate adjustment as this unprecedented story continues to develop. The political fallout is already undeniable. Senior staffers inside both parties are reporting unprecedented tensions as they scramble to interpret the Supreme Court's ruling. Republican lawmakers who once saw themselves as insulated from legal or institutional pressures are now facing unavoidable scrutiny, with every committee hearing, vote, and public statement under the microscope. Democrats, meanwhile, are juggling the optics of enforcement versus overreach, knowing that the slightest misstep could be weaponized by political opponents. Capitol Hill insiders describe closed-door meetings that are more intense than anything since the 2021 crisis, with legal counsel and policy advisors racing to map out every contingency. Every representative and senator is being briefed on what the ruling means for legislation, oversight, and their personal obligations, with multiple scenarios being modeled in real time. Sources indicate that even some of the most seasoned lawmakers are visibly shaken, realizing that this is not a normal political moment. It is a structural test of the entire system. The international response is equally dramatic. Allies from NATO, the EU, and Asia are expressing grave concern about the sudden shift in U.S. governance. Emergency calls are reportedly happening between heads of state and U.S. officials, and some nations are temporarily delaying agreements and trade decisions until the implications of the ruling are clarified. Analysts warn that this uncertainty could ripple through global supply chains, affecting energy, technology, and defense contracts. Even financial markets are feeling the tremors. Stock futures have swung sharply. Bond yields are reacting to uncertainty. And currency markets are signaling heightened volatility. Hedge funds and institutional investors are actively recalibrating risk models, anticipating regulatory shifts, enforcement actions, and political consequences that could affect trillions in assets. In short, the Supreme Court decision is not just a domestic story. It is a global event with immediate economic consequences. For Trump and his inner circle, the ruling is catastrophic. Legal experts describe it as a complete dismantling of his last line of defense, forcing previously protected actions and strategies into public and legal scrutiny. Every strategy that relied on delay, ambiguity, or procedural loopholes has now collapsed. Sources close to the former administration report urgent strategy meetings as aides, lawyers, and operatives attempt to salvage political and legal positioning in real time. This is also a media firestorm. Cable, streaming, and social platforms are flooding with commentary, analysis, and live updates. Every post, tweet, and news segment is amplifying the sense of urgency and chaos, creating a feedback loop that is intensifying the political pressure. Insiders warn that the next 48 hours will determine whether the former administration can stabilize the narrative or if the momentum of the ruling will continue unchallenged. Federal agencies are now under extreme operational pressure. Legal directives from the Supreme Court require immediate compliance, and sources report internal memos circulating with detailed instructions on how to implement the ruling. Compliance officers, regulators, and department heads are being personally held accountable for adherence, with legal counsel warning of potential criminal and civil consequences for failures. Meanwhile, intelligence and law enforcement agencies are heightened to alert status, anticipating potential unrest or public reactions. The ruling has effectively activated a series of contingency protocols, with national security considerations now entwined with what was initially seen as a judicial or legislative issue. Analysts point out that this level of cross-agency mobilization is unprecedented in modern history, underscoring the magnitude of the Supreme Court's decision. Looking ahead, the landscape of American governance is forever changed. The Supreme Court has not just issued a ruling, it has redrawn the boundaries of accountability, power, and legal enforcement. Lawmakers, corporate leaders, federal officials, and international partners all now operate under a new, non-negotiable reality. Every decision made in the coming days will echo for months, if not years, affecting legislation, enforcement, and political alignments. The urgency cannot be overstated. Citizens, observers, and media alike are being asked to watch in real time as constitutional and institutional principles are tested. This is a moment where inaction is impossible, where every participant in government, law, and public life must adjust to the new paradigm created by the court. If you want to stay ahead of these seismic developments, make sure to comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We will continue tracking every legal filing, legislative maneuver, and institutional response as the Supreme Court ruling reshapes America's political and legal reality in real time.